The seeds of the 1975 crisis lay in events which occurred at the Lodge a year before. Black Friday, the 13th of December, 1974. An Executive Council meeting was held to approve a loan authority of $4 billion for Minerals Minister Rex Connor. The Governor-General, who must sign all executive decisions, was not contacted before this crucial meeting, and his approval did not occur until the next day. The loans affair was born.
I phoned him. It was a Friday night, I think, wasn't it? A Friday night. And I was leaving for overseas the Saturday afternoon following. And so I rang him at Kirribilli House. And they said, oh, he's gone to the ballet. He was at the ballet. Romeo and Juliet with a new bride. And so I said to the staff there, I said, well, when do you expect him back? And they said, oh, well, usually doesn't like being disturbed when he comes back from functions at night. I said, well, you always take a cup of tea into him first thing in the morning, I believe, about 6 o'clock. I said, would you tell him, or tell me when you've taken the cup of tea in, because I'll then ring him. And I did.
John was at the Opera House on that particular night and wasn't even told that the Executive Council was to meet. First of all, he thought it might have been an accident, some bit of a bungle on the part of some of the bureaucratic people who had to organise it. But it soon became apparent to John that he had been deliberately not told about the meeting and therefore wasn't there. And that, I think it would be too strong a word to say that caused him to become suspicious of Gough, but it caused him to have a sort of uneasiness about Gough.
But Kerr, of course, by that stage was being asked by some of his mates, because he'd moved up Government House, of course. He often saw some... he was being courted by a lot of distinguished people, and he enjoyed it. He was very embarrassed. They said, oh, you've been authorising any billion-dollar loans recently. And he was getting quite embarrassed by it. But he never raised it with me afterwards at all. Never.
How long have you been involved in this particular aspect of your business? Raising money?
Raising money only about 1 year.
Only about 1 year?
That's right.
What was your stand?
Labor relied upon this obscure money dealer, Tirath Kemlani. But Kemlani never raised the money, and the government's reputation was compromised. The politics of 1975 was dominated by the loans affair, ministerial sackings and economic upheaval, which only tempted Malcolm Fraser to force an election. The clinching event was the forced resignation of Minerals Minister Rex Connor, when it was revealed that he and Kemlani had negotiated about the loan after the cancellation of the authority. When Connor resigned, Fraser pulled the trigger.
It was because the whole record of the government over a considerable period was disgraceful. There'd been scandal after scandal. There'd been deception of the Executive Council, deception of the Governor-General himself. And, you know, it's easy to forget these things now.
Fraser was now prepared to use the powers of the Senate to block the budget until Whitlam agreed to call a general election. An election Labor was certain to lose. This was the first fateful step that precipitated the 1975 crisis.
The opposition now has no choice. We will use the power vested in us by the Constitution and delay the passage of the government's money bills through the Senate until the Parliament goes to the people.
Recall these words.
At this point, Whitlam took his epic decision to defy the opposition and the Senate. It would be the greatest battle of his career. Fraser's audacity was met by Whitlam's defiance. The crisis was now joined.
We will not yield to blackmail. We will not be panicked. We will not turn over the government of this country to vested interests, pressure groups and newspaper proprietors whose tactics would destroy the standards and traditions of parliamentary government. The business of government will go on.
Whitlam's entire strategy depended upon the acquiescence of Sir John Kerr. He was adamant that Kerr would and should support him. But Whitlam had misread Kerr. From the very start of the crisis, the Governor-General had lost his trust in Whitlam, and he saw a dismissal as a possibility.
So must Sir John Kerr accept your advice, whatever advice you give?
Unquestionably, the Governor-General takes the advice from his Prime Minister and from no one else.
And must act on that advice?
Unquestionably, the Governor-General must act on the advice of his Prime Minister.
There is no tolerance here. He must
None whatever.
Gough proceeded to needle John, I think that's a justified word, publicly announcing constantly that the Governor-General would do exactly what I say. There's no exception. He just has to do exactly what I say. And, of course, that wasn't the position at all. The Governor-General had his own independent rights. And as Gough constantly reiterated this theme, so John became more and more troubled.
It's true, as Barry Jones says, that Whitlam treats everybody as equals, even the Queen. So I suppose Kerr felt that by being treated as an equal by Whitlam was in some way derogatory to the office.
The day after the budget was deferred, the senior constitutional lawyer within the opposition, Bob Ellicott, released a crucial opinion, a copy of which was requested by Sir John Kerr.
Well, so far as the Governor-General was concerned, I indicated that I thought he had the power to dismiss a government, which meant dismissing the Prime Minister, withdrawing the commission to the Prime Minister, if the government persisted in the attitude that it could govern without supply.
I don't think that Bob Ellicott was right in asserting that whenever there was a possibility of supply being refused, the government had an obligation to resign, the Prime Minister and the Ministry. That means that however dastardly the process, the refusal may be, however self-serving, the government of the day can be put to the sword, and I don't think that was right.
On the night of the 16th of October, there was a state banquet at Yarralumla. It was at this function that Sir John Kerr became alarmed that Whitlam might try to sack him.
Lady Kerr was there, Gough Whitlam and Margaret Whitlam, Tun Abdul Razak and his wife. And in a jesting sort of way, Gough said, I don't know how it cropped up, but Gough said, well, it could be a race between May getting to the Queen to have you dismissed and you terminating my commission as Prime Minister. And everybody laughed. It was a sort of joke. But it was one of those jokes about behind which there was a great deal of meaning.
Well, I just quite lightheartedly, passed it off. And of course, Kerr saw very much more significance in what I said than there was.
It demonstrated that Gough understood that he had the power to go to the Queen and demand that John be sacked. It demonstrated to John that Whitlam knew all about the reserve powers and that the danger that to him that John might exercise them. So it was a very significant little joking interlude.
Kerr had not discussed it with Whitlam. He made it fairly clear he didn't want to. And I said, well, John, I said, of course the Prime Minister could move beforehand and have your commission withdrawn. And at that stage he became quite animated and said, yes, I know.
For the future of the country.
After nearly a week into the deadlock, there was agitation in the country. Kerr was now prompted by the force of public opinion to look for a solution. With Whitlam's permission, he then began talking to Fraser as well. The first Fraser-Kerr meeting was on the 21st of October.
I thought that if he asked if he could talk to Fraser, then I should agree to that.
You assumed that the Governor-General would act honourably during any such dialogue?
We would have had a cup of tea or a drink, I think, through most of those meetings. That was his general practice. And he was in some ways, a chatty sort of person. I mean, he liked to talk, he liked people.
The man who served as departmental head to both Whitlam and Fraser now reveals startling information which suggests this first meeting was a turning point.
The Governor-General had indicated to Mr. Fraser that he had the threat of dismissal hanging over him, and that if he showed his hand to Mr. Whitlam, that he would be dismissed. And I think that, and whilst the Governor-General may have not spelled out to Mr. Fraser precisely what action he had in mind, I think that was sufficient indication that anyone would need, that the Governor-General's decision or action would be unacceptable to Mr. Whitlam.
So you did feel during the crisis that the Governor-General was in fact under threat from the Prime Minister?
Yes, I did.
Did you gain this impression from your talks with Sir John, from the way he acted, from signals he gave?
No, not at all. Just from a judgment of the circumstances and a judgment of the people on the stage.
The then head of the Prime Minister's Department, John Menadue, says that after the dismissal, in a discussion with you, you indicated that during your talks with Sir John Kerr during the crisis, the Governor-General did in fact indicate to you that he was concerned that the Prime Minister might move against him.
No.